Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to IIT Gandhinagar virtually for this 11th webinar in our series from the Archaeological Sciences Center here. Some of you may have attended earlier talks, and you know that we've had a series of very distinguished speakers starting from the remote prehistory of the Indian subcontinent, South Asia, all the way to proto-history, and we've had a few talks on the Harappan civilization in particular. Today we have probably the last talk on this topic, and future talks will move forward in time and deal with the early historical and later historical periods of ancient India, basically. And today we decided, in consultation with our speaker, of course, Professor Prabhakar, that Dholavira, this famous Harappan city of the Ran of Kutch, having been recently designated as World Heritage Site by UNESCO, it would be quite appropriate to explore this site more in detail. Professor Prabhakar is eminently qualified to do so because as a young archaeologist, he was involved in the excavations under the direction of Dr. R.S. Bish from Archaeological Survey of India. And he has returned to the site many times. And here also at IIT Gandhinagar Archaeological Sciences Center, we've had a number of projects, research projects, connected to specific aspects of Dholavira. In fact, our center, for example, to quote only one example, conducted for Archaeological Survey of India, a drone 3D survey with multiple sensors and created 3D imagery for ASI, some of which was used in the dossier which was submitted to UNESCO for the designation. And this dossier, incidentally, was prepared under the direction of Dr. Prabhakar. He retired recently from ASI and joined, or rather rejoined, IIT Gandhinagar as associate professor. And he has extensive experience in many parts of India where he was posted under ASI, but more specifically on Harappan archaeology, burial practices, bead manufacture and bead making techniques, including drill bits in particular. He has authored many research papers. So he is quite an authority on these topics, and we are most happy to host him. Of course, he's one of our team, but I will now request Dr. Prabhakar to take over and deliver his talk. And later on, we will take questions and answers, which you are all requested to type in the question and answer box. Thank you. Dr. Prabhakar.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Michel, for this kind introduction. Today's talk is more on how the Dholavira site, it was inscribed in the World Heritage List. I'm not going to talk extensively on the findings because it's well known and it can be another talk. Here in this presentation, I would like to kind of bring before you the kind of procedures followed for inscription of a historical site or a property in the World Heritage List, and also how Dholavira qualified some of the key points or key attributes. Before kind of nominating any site, the most key aspect is to understand the attributes to satisfy the outstanding universal value. That is the key aspect in terms of nominating a site for the World Heritage List. And since 2007, this has been a very important aspect in the nomination process. Before that, it was very easy for nominating a site, but since 2007, the World Heritage Committee has adopted certain detailed procedures, among which the outstanding universal value became the most important aspect. So I would like to start the presentation, but first of all, I would like to acknowledge Professor R.S. Bisht, who is a guest professor here and the former Joint Director General of Archaeological Survey of India, who, along with the late J.P. Joshi ji, I mean, they are the two key aspects when we talk about Dholavira. J.P. Joshi ji, he discovered the site, and after nearly 2 decades, Dr. Bisht started the investigations. And along with him, there were many archaeologists involved. I mean, right from the day one, I mean, there were many archaeologists, and the foremost we can remember is Dr. Y.S. Rawat, who was with Dr. Bisht from the day one when he was working at excavation branch in Baroda. Then later on, many people joined in his team, including Dr. D.N. Dimri, A.K. Patel ji, Urmila Sant ji. There are many people. I mean, it's very difficult to name each and every one of them, but these are the most key figures who were working at the site shoulder to shoulder with Dr. Bisht, who were training a whole lot of young students like me. I was also trained at Dholavira, and also the entire staff, the local villagers, because the local villagers, they played a very crucial role in exposing most of the archaeological remains there. And that's how it's a kind of a story starting from around 1986 onwards, when the surface investigation started, and ultimately the excavations came to an end in 2005. So the entire ASI team, entire village community, entire team of Dr. Bisht, they're all important in terms of understanding each and every aspect of Dholaviran. And ultimately that formed the basis for the preparation of the dossier, because dossier preparation, it doesn't come or is afresh, like it is based on the previous research, and I did not do anything great. I mean, I just used all the published data, I compiled it basically and presented it in the format. So that is the basic work, because all the basic research that is very much important for writing a dossier. And of course, I acknowledge Indian Institute of Technology, Gandhinagar, from where we conducted a series of research, and still we are conducting a series of researches on Dholavira and other Harappan related aspects. And lastly, on the entire ASI team, the consultants, the team who actually work day and night for the preparation of the dossier, their contribution is it cannot be ignored, and they are the key persons, starting from the Director General Archaeological Survey of India onwards, the former DG Usha Sharma ji, who actually initiated the preparation of the dossier, then the present DG Vidyavati ji, who was there at the site twice or thrice to actually brief all the aspects to the Alpha expert, and also to conduct the stakeholders. So it is not a one-person job. It's an entire teamwork, and I really kind of want to acknowledge the entire ASI team, and I want to really thank them for their contribution. And of course, there are a lot of students. I mean, you can see here a lot of students who were there year after year, starting from 89 onwards to 2005. Year after year, there used to be at least 30 students who were trained there, and most of them are in senior positions in Archaeological Survey of India. So with this brief introduction, I would like to kind of give one or two slides, present one or two slides about the discoveries. I mean, how the discoveries came into being in 1924 after 3 years of excavation at Harappan and 2 years of excavation at Mohenjo-daro. Sir John Marshall compared the artifacts along with the Aram Sani, Adi Banerjee, and other archaeologists, and they discovered a commonality in between the findings from Harappan and Mohenjo-daro, and that's how they announced the discovery in the Illustrated London News on September 20th, 1924. So that was read worldwide, and immediately in the next issue itself, Professor A.H. Sayes, who was excavating or who was working in the Asian region, he noticed Harappan seals in a datable context from Susa, and immediately a chronology was arrived. So in the absence of any absolute dating methods, no radiocarbon dating technologies, we immediately dated the earliest urban civilization of South Asia, and that's how the journey begins. And after several excavations, after independence, now we are in a very good state of understanding of this Harappan civilization, or the earliest urbanizations, and now we understand the antecedent phases starting from the early food producing era. to the emergence of the urbanization in the Indus and its adjoining rivers, because it is not only concentrated to the Indus River. It is spread across several tributaries of Indus, and also on the Saraswati, which is identified with the Gagar, Hakra river network, and also in Gujarat. I mean, we have a number of sites in Gujarat, particularly in the northern region, Kutch district, and also a few sites along the coast of northern Saurashtra. So we have a wide spread of this civilization, and we understand the dynamics. We understand the initial phases, the domestication of plant and animals led to the settling of human life in the South Asian context here around the site of Mehergarh, and ultimately emergence of various technologies, including the pyrotechnology, that gave a lot of impotence to the emergence of the urban society. So now we have a better state of understanding. We have understood the distribution of the Harappan sites over a large area. We have also come to the knowledge of different phases that were contemporary to the Harappan civilization, and they are named variously. And if we look into the settlement hierarchy, we also now understand the presence of at least 6 major cities, which can be termed as cities because of its size, because of its findings, because of its urban nature, and they are incidentally spread across very important geographical locations. Maybe they were administering a hinterland. If we kind of rely on the theories of Posel and Marquenoyer, so they were all city-states. They might have been city-states looking after an hinterland of around 160,000 to 170,000 square kilometers, and overall they were contributing to the entire Harappan civilization, or the entire civilization, due to certain sharing of resources, sharing of ideology, and various factors. So this is the kind of distribution one can see of the Harappan culture. With the important cities, you can see the bigger dots are the cities of Mohenjo-daro, Lakhanjadado, Ganveriwala, Harappa, all in Pakistan, then Rakhigarhi and Dholavira in India. So Dholavira is the smallest among of all these sites, and but it satisfies certain urban characteristics. So this is a brief introduction, and now I will directly shift to the UNESCO. I mean, how these things came into existence. I mean, why World Heritage, the concept of World Heritage, what is a cultural heritage, what is a natural heritage, what is outstanding universal value. So these are all certain key aspects, but that all of them, they had a very long history. I mean, that dates back to even 1954, and even before in the 1930s, the Athens and the Venice charters. And that's where the initial impetus started, and gradually it was understood that there should be several mechanisms to kind of safeguard the heritage of the world. It may not belong to a single nation or a single community or a single state, but it belongs to the entire human community. So that was the key aspect, and in this regard, the 1972 convention, it is very important. It mentions about the cultural and the natural heritage and some of the key aspects related to the protection of these heritage. So if we look into this convention, 1972 convention, which was adopted on 16th November 1972, it defines the cultural and the natural heritage. So under the cultural heritage, we have monuments, group of buildings and sites, and the natural heritage, physical, biological, geological, and physiographical features. And there are, I mean, there have been various developments on this aspect also. Now we have even mixed properties. I mean, a property can be a cultural as well as a natural site, and it can go under the category of a mixed property also. So this 1972 convention, it also introduced the concept of cultural and natural heritage of outstanding universal value. Why it should be protected after all? I mean, why it's not restricted to alone one country? So it has to be, it has to have certain attributes, certain properties from which we can term it as a property of outstanding universal value, and it belongs to the entire human community. So that this convention also introduced some of the key operating mechanisms, like establishment of a World Heritage Committee, which is still functioning, which monitors the entire nomination process, and with the help of 3 NGOs, non-governmental organizations, they evaluate different categories of monuments and sites like ICROM. ICROM, they look into the key aspects of conservation of the sites, training related aspects. ICOMOS, it evaluates the entire nomination process. Once the nomination dossier is submitted to the World Heritage Committee, ICOMOS evaluates them, then they send an expert or one or two experts to the site to evaluate the ground realities for the cultural properties. For the natural properties, IUCN is the agency which does all the aspects of evaluation. So later on, UNESCO also adopted this 2003 Convention of Intangible Cultural Heritage, through which the intangible heritage is also being protected and be also inscribed. So looking into the history of inscription of World Heritage properties from the entire world, as of now, there are 1154 World Heritage properties from the entire world. And you can see the cultural properties, they dominate. I mean, they dominate more than half, or even 3/4 of the entire collection of World Heritage properties. And it is natural also. We have a lot of cultural vestiges which have been created through the ages, starting from the prehistoric times to even to the modern era. And if we look into the regional distribution of these World Heritage properties, Europe and Latin America, Europe and North America, they dominate. I mean, if you look into the history of inscription of the World Heritage properties, initially all of them, they were from Europe. Most of them, they were Europe and also from North America, and that's how it has become a dominating factor. And gradually, what is happening due to the changes in the principles of inscription of World Heritage properties, now the picture is slowly starting to change. I mean, if you look into the graph, the category of sites which are protected, you can see again cultural thing dominates. It's always a dominant thing, and through the entire history also it's dominating. And there is a kind of a dip around 2002. I mean, why it's happening? I mean, if we compare the region-wise nomination also, again, if you look at the region-wise nomination up to 2002, it was peaking everywhere. It was peaking, and around 2002 there is a dip. So that was the time when it was decided that, you see, I mean, there should be acceptance of nomination of one property from one state party. It's not more than one site can be accepted in a calendar year. So certain principles were adopted, certain nomination procedures were elaborated, and that's so there is a dip. And again, after this criteria were adopted, and slowly again the tendency picked up. But it did not reach to those levels where it was more number of sites were being inscribed, and the two belonging to a certain region only. I mean, World Heritage Committee, they also observed that there is a kind of a mismatch, I mean, in terms of countries, in terms of regions in the World Heritage List. And so they decided to target those regions and those countries where there are least number of World Heritage properties. And that's how their principles go on changing, and the continuous evolving mechanism. And more importantly, they started to adopt a mechanism. There's a 5 steps mechanism. First and foremost is the tentative list. Every state party, they should identify potential cultural properties or natural properties or mixed properties which can be inscribed in future in the World Heritage List. They have to prepare a tentative list and they have to submit. There is again a nomination process. It's a format they have to submit to the World Heritage Committee, and after evaluation, the World Heritage Committee accepts and places it in the World Heritage List. Once a property enters a tentative list, then only it can be nominated for the World Heritage List. So without that, the World Heritage Committee will not accept the nomination dossier. So it is a prerequisite that each state party should establish a tentative listing and then proceed on to prepare the nomination dossier. Then this nomination dossier arrives in the next stage. Again, it involves a lot of research, background research. So it's not an easy job. It takes at least 2 years in many cases to prepare a nomination dossier. Even for the case of Dholavira, it took nearly 2 years. I mean, we were sent the job in 2018, and we submitted the dossier in 2020 January. So it took 2 years. It takes a lot of research, taking a lot of inputs from the field, collecting collecting information about visitor statistics, conservation measures, then various aspects related to the site's maintenance, visitor movement, visitor management. So all these aspects are taken care of. The basic document may be the research document on explaining the attributes related to the outstanding universal value, but there are many additional features that goes along with the nomination process. So once the nomination dossier is submitted, the World Heritage Committee sends it to the advisory bodies. Advisory bodies, I told you briefly earlier, ICOMOS for the cultural properties, IUCN for the natural properties, and ICROM for the for assessing the conservation needs, also the state of conservation and the any training aspects that is required. So ICOMOS, after evaluation, they submit the detailed inputs that is also shared with the state bodies. Like in the case of India, it was shared with Archaeological Survey of India. There were many queries, a list of queries raised by ICOMOS, which we went on to answer them, which we went on to fulfill them. Because they were the most important aspects. So once these set of evaluation inquiries and replies are received, once they are satisfied, then the World Heritage Committee takes a final decision depending upon the report submitted by ICOMOS, depending upon the state of preservation of the site, and also the characteristic features described in the nomination dossier. They decide upon whether to put it on the World Heritage list or not. And ultimately, they can either approve for World Heritage nomination, they can refer for further modifications, or they can completely defer a proposal also. So next comes the criteria, and all of this entire process, I mean, filing of nomination, role of advisory bodies, the entire the pillar of nomination dossier is the criteria. I mean, how criteria are fixed, how criteria are selected, how it is justified to kind of generate the outstanding universal value. There is a statement. If you look into the final statement in the World Heritage Committee website, you will see inscription of a property, outstanding universal value, then the criterion which actually justifies the outstanding universal value. So the outstanding universal value, again, it can be briefly described in the tentative list also. So looking into all of these, I mean, now at the present state of condition, we have in total 40 World Heritage properties in India, out of which 32 are cultural, natural 7, and 1 mixed property. And we have also put 46 properties in the tentative list also. And also the World Heritage Committee, they periodically revise the principles, they revise their objectives, and they have put forth 5 C's of strategic objectives for the inscription of the World Heritage property, like credibility, conservation, capacity, communication, and communities. You see, each and every aspect has been taken care of. Here, the communities, they are very important. What is the state of involvement of the local communities? Because they are the largest stakeholders. They live in the close proximity of the site. How they are involved, how they are trained, also how they are taken care of. All these kind of aspects, it has to be satisfied in the nomination process. Unless and until the local communities are taken care of, they are given involved in the consultative mechanism. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to define the entire site management aspect also. So now we come for the outstanding universal value. What is this outstanding universal value? I mean, in terms of cultural or natural significance, it has to be exceptional, and it has to also transcend national boundaries. So this is the universal cultural heritage value, and it's to be of common importance for present and future generations of all humanity, and it's not restricted to a single country or a single state party. So and also the protection aspect, the protection or conservation is the utmost important aspect. It has to be given the highest importance, and the international community takes part as such in the entire mechanism also. So if we look into the pillars of outstanding universal value, I mean, if we see that one of the pillar is the it has to satisfy the either one of the criteria for the cultural properties. Criteria 1 to 6, at least one has to be satisfied. Then the property has to satisfy the integrity and authenticity. How far the remains present at that point of time is indicative authentically of the entire archaeological remains. If we take in the case of Dholavira, how far it belongs to the 3rd millennium BCE context, how new features are not added. I mean, we cannot completely alter a site by adding new features. So what is the original character of the site? That is the authenticity. We have to understand, and we need to point out in case any major conservation measures have been taken place. Also, we need to point out why we carried out certain conservation measures, maybe for the structural stability of some of these sites. And another aspect is the integrity, how we are going to protect the overall nominated property. I mean, whether you have proper mechanism, you have the trained force, you have the sets of acts and rules also, and whether you have the buffer zone to cover the entire property, so that no unscrupulous building activities or developmental activities take place, which may threaten the nominated property itself, or in the future also it may threaten. In the past also we have seen some instances in the case of India also, where one of the World Heritage property was put on the endangered list, and later on, after satisfying the conditions put forth by the World Heritage Committee, it was removed from the endangered list also. And what are the measures we take for the protection and the management? What is the site management plan? What is the conservation management plan? What are the various visitor movement plan? All these things. I mean, all these things. They are the pillars of outstanding universal value. But the attributes of the site, it's the first pillar. It's the first pillar, and it has to be very well formulated. It has to be given with substantive examples. And this is how the relation between the cultural, natural, mixed properties, and also cultural landscape. This is a recent development about a cultural landscape. So for cultural properties and natural properties, either one of the criteria, 1 to 6 for cultural properties and 7 to 10 for the natural properties. And mixed properties, at least one from each, either cultural or natural. And some of them, they may be mixed as well as cultural landscape. So it's a combination. Now there is the concept of entire landscape. If we take Ajanta caves as an example, it's not only the caves, it's not only one side of the cliff where the caves are located. It is the entire river valley, how they located, how they situated these caves, how they actually use the entire landscape for their overall benefit. Similarly, in the case of Dholavira, how they came to this island of Dholavira. It's located on the island of Khadir. It's far separated from many of the contemporary sites. But why did they came from? Why did they select a particular landscape in between two river streams and located the site to harness the water resources? So these are all the attributes. These are all the most important, crucial aspects which we need to explain in the nomination dossier for satisfying the outstanding universal value. So based on that, any property, they are inscribed. You can see the Great Living Chola temples, they are inscribed under the two categories, criteria 2 and 3. So what are these categories? These are the list of 6 categories, cultural criteria under which we nominate a World Heritage property and also justify the outstanding universal value. The first one is it should be a masterpiece of human creative genius, like in the case of Taj Mahal. It's the masterpiece of human creative genius. So if one satisfies this one criteria alone, a property can be inscribed. So the second one is important interchange of human values, and how in the cultural space there are contributions from one region to another, how certain influences might have been happened, and how the overall aspects of technology, monumental arts, town planning, or landscape design might have happened in a particular geological or geographical space. The third one is to bear a unique or at least exceptional testimony to cultural tradition or to a civilization that is existing or living or disappeared. Like in the case of Dholavira, we nominated under 3 categories, 2, 3, and 4. And later on, I will introduce some of the key aspects of Dholavira. Then you can correlate them also, and why we we selected these criteria. The fourth one is to be an outstanding example of a type of building, architectural or technological ensemble or landscape, which illustrates significant stages of human history. I mean, this entire sentence, it has to be broken down into individual parts, and even among the individual parts, if either one of the condition is satisfied, then we can build up a kind of a justification for the outstanding universal value. For example, outstanding example of a type of building alone, it can be taken and it can be elaborated, or an architectural or technological ensemble that can be also taken as a separate criteria and also elaborated, or a landscape alone can be taken also. In the case of Dholavira, we were fortunate that all the three things they were satisfying. It was an outstanding example of a type of building, architectural and a technological ensemble, and also in such a landscape that it is so unique, so it satisfied all these criteria. The fifth one is the traditional human settlement, land use or sea use, again representative of a culture. And the sixth one is tangibly associated with the events or living traditions. For example, in the case of Bodh Gaya temple, you can see the criteria 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. Except 5, all the other criteria it was fulfilling. So it was a masterpiece of human creative genius, interchange of human values because of the spread of Buddhism and adaptation of various Buddhistic tradition. It was an exceptional testimony to the past cultural tradition or to a civilization, and an outstanding example of a type of building because it is one of its kind of a Nagara style of a temple with this pyramidal roof. I mean, Nagara style, even though originally it initiated with a pyramidal roof, later on it adopted a curvilinear roof in the Latina Nagara, Shikara, and other later temples. We have the Bhumija, the Shikari type of temples. But here, this is one of the exceptional example of a pyramidal type of a Nagara type of temple. And living traditions, the criteria 6. You see, I mean, this is the kind of things we need to look into, and we need to elaborate and kind of satisfy and build up the outstanding universal value. So coming to Dholavira, the location itself is very unique. Looking into the context, you see among all the sites in the entire Harappan civilization, this is the most important site, the largest, one of the largest. It is located on an island. It's located on an island in such a manner that it was probably monitoring the entire trade mechanism, the maritime trade as well as the land routes. They were monitoring the acquisition of the raw materials. Now extensive research has gone into the aspects related to the raw materials acquisition and the redistribution. Most thankfully to Rendella, who has done an extraordinary work of comparing each and every raw material from the Harappan civilization and also provenancing them and to understand the movement in a better manner. So if we look at the geographical distribution again in the context of Gujarat, we see three distinct regions: Kutch region, the Saurashtra, and the mainland Gujarat. And the sites are located mostly on in the Kutch region and the northern coast of Saurashtra, and some isolated sites here in the Lothal. Lothal is an isolated site. I mean, looking into the mature Harappan context, it's an isolated site, and again, there are many important factors which helped in the location of these sites. One of them might have been the high sea level or the lower land level, enabling extensive movement through water. And that's how these sites might have been related to each other, and they are located all along the coast. If you look into the location, there are most important sites located all along the coast, and most importantly, Dholavira, and they might have been controlling all the waterways and communicating even with the Sindh, because we have very good evidence of communication networks happening into the Sindh region also. And ultimately, they were also embarking on long-distance maritime trade towards the Western Asian region. We have very good evidence of their trade activities. So coming to the location itself, why the location is so much important? I mean, if we look at the criteria 3, the landscape is so important. Why they were locating the site in such a landscape? Present day, we understand it's a semi-arid region, it's a low rainfall region. But why they were locating them And particularly, if you look at the terrain, they were locating the site on the western edge of the Kadir Island, which is 32 kilometers. There are many other regions where larger rivers are available. Extensive water reservoirs can also be constructed, but they were understanding the terrain in such a manner. They were understanding the flow of the water, the velocity, movement of the water during the rainy season. Everything they might have understood, and that's how they were locating the site in between two streams here, somewhere here. These two streams emanate from the northern hills. It is a topmost point. Drainage is on both directions, and it is on the south-southwestern direction. So there is a steep gradient here, upward, somewhere here, but it tends to kind of flatten somewhere here. So they selected a site in such a manner so that the water flow is not so rapid. It can be controlled. They can create reservoirs at crucial positions so that they can divert the rainwater during the monsoon season, and they can also store them in the man-made reservoirs also. So the location, first of all, we need to understand why they situated the site on the western edge of Kadir Island, in between two streams. They did not select many other streams. There are, if you see the drainage pattern, there are many other streams also, but they did not select all of them. They might have studied extensively, and the settlement goes much earlier. It dates back to 3000 BCE. So that's how we kind of illustrated under criteria 2 that the settlement here, it's fully established fortification with a massive walls, and also the ceramics. If you look at the ceramics, they have influence of the Sindh region. Certain Amri type pottery have been found in the earliest phases. Dr. Bisht compares the Amri 2B, that is the early Harappan culture of the Sindh region. So there are similarities of Amri 2B ceramics at the site here. And from the very early period, we have evidence of copper metallurgy, which is an advanced technology, bead manufacturing, and shell manufacturing. So all these kind of things clearly indicated that the settlers who came here at the very beginning, they might not be the local people. At least they might have some influence from the Sindh region to establishing the hallmark features of settlements, which were already prevalent, in the case of Sindh region, dating back to the 4th millennium BCE itself. So this is the earliest stage of fortification, which extended towards the north. During stage 2, there are 7 stages in the overall growth of the Harappan city of Dholavira, and stage 1, 2, and 3, it belongs to the early Harappan. So we see rapid changes happening in the stage 3. We also see the emergence of the Harappan elements here, Harappan pottery, ceramic forms, decorative features that start to emerge here, and also some square seals without any inscription, with only the narrative scenes depicted on the seals. That also start to emerge. That's a typical square stamp seal with a squarish boss at the back, not the bipartite boss at the back, which is a typical feature of the Harappan culture. So we have emergence of a full-fledged city. Maybe the planners they constructed the city well in advance before populating the people here, because of their already accumulated knowledge of establishing sites or the existing sites there in the Sindh region. It might have helped in formulating a better city here, and they started to tap the water resources also. So that's how we see in the Harappan phase, starting from around 2600 or 2550 BCE onwards, we see the full-scale configuration of the city located between the two streams, provisions for damming at regular intervals so that the water can be diverted into these reservoirs. Here also the evidence of damming so that the water can be diverted into open areas. Here they might not have constructed the man-made reservoirs here. They might have diverted water into open areas, and also there are certain vacant areas in the middle town and the Bailey part also, which might have also spread as functioned as water reservoirs, open air water reservoirs. So if we look at the planning, if we look at the orientation, if we look at the ratios and proportions, this is a hallmark city, well planned and well executed, and totally following the well-established norms at that particular point of time. Later on, after the urban phase, it flourished for around 600 to 650 years. So around 1950 BCE, what we see is a devolution. We see the shrinking of the city again to the southern portion of the city. The stage 6. I mean, it belongs to the late Harappan at the site of Dholavira, which is a non-urban phase of the Harappan culture, where again we see the disappearance of Harappan ceramics and introduction of a new type of ceramics, which is more akin to the type of ceramics found in the Ahad Banas culture in Rajasthan. So we have a complete transformation here, yet there is a continuity. If we look at the continuity aspects, we have the same sort of bead manufacturing technology continuing there. We have the continuation in the form of the ceramics. The Harappan script was continued, but no narrative scenes, no motifs were depicted. Only the script survived along with the bead manufacturing industry. Bead manufacturing industry, Gujarat is very, very important because of the abundant availability of raw materials very close to the Harappan sites, and from where they could procure them and manufacture them to a larger extent. So this is the complete history of beginning and end of the Harappan city. And here scholars like Dr. Bisht and Professor Michel Danino, who have worked on the various ratios and proportions, they have understood the kind of meticulous planning it was involved in. I mean, you can see various ratios and proportions, very meticulously planned city. And even if one draw diagonals from the northwest to southeast and northeast to southwest, it coincides at a particular point of a crossroad of two major streets. So that is the kind of meticulous planning we see in the case of Dholavira. And this is what we emphasized in the criteria too, and why certain influences happen in the form of ceramics and even in the form of town building. You can see the kind of conjoined partitions of the citadel in the case of Kalibangan, in the case of Dholavira, and later in the case of Surkotada. I mean, these are the commonalities. I mean, it did not happen, coincidentally. It was a well-planned, thought out. Only the citadel portion, it did have a conjoined wall separating both these divisions, and it was adopted in other settlements also. So this was highlighted in the criteria too. Then comes various examples of architecture, monumental arts, technological aspects. All these things were clearly demonstrated in the criteria 3 and 4. So we have excellent evidence of monumental architecture here, which is exceptional, which is unique in the case of Dholavira, because we don't have examples from the other sites due to the poor state of preservation, because the building materials were burnt bricks or mud bricks. Burnt bricks, they do survive, but in the case of Harappa and to a smaller extent at Mohenjo-daro, they have been looted in the past for the brick ballast for creating the railway lines in Punjab and Sindh respectively. But here in the case of Dholavira and most of the sites in Kutch, Makran and Baluchistan, we have the luxury of stone architecture. So it is very, very well preserved. So we have very good evidences of the fortification, the gateways, and more importantly, these kind of the pillar members. So this is before the discovery of these pillar members in situ in its original condition at Dholavira. Scholars were baffled with the presence of a large number of pillar members, banded limestone pillar members at Mohenjo-daro, and also a few from Harappa. Their exact function could not be understood. But here in the case of Dholavira, it was found exactly in its original condition. Even though the north gate, it was again plundered during the late Harappan period. Some of the architectural members, they have been removed and reused by the late Harappans in a bead manufacturing workshop. Like you can see the complete plundering of the pillar bases. The original wooden pillars above them might have been also looted. There could have been wooden pillars above this. So this is the kind of situation happening in the case of North Gate. And coming to the North Gate, it is the complete gate complex, very well preserved. In the case of Harappan culture, we have full configuration of 2 chambers on either side, a central passage, Then we have again ratios and proportions in this construction also. The width of the passage is 3.5 meters, length is 10.5 meters, that is 1:3. The length of the chamber is 7 meters, that is 1:2. So everything was meticulously planned, and it was very well proportionate in terms of the entire architectural ensemble. So coming to the pillar members, again we had very good evidence of the original location of these pillar members. You can see this is the condition when it was excavated. Square pillar member came at the base, then came the truncated biconcave, and then came two biconvex pillars which were on top of these pillar members. And this is the reconstruction of how it might have been placed. One might have one above another, and above these there should have been wooden pillars, solid pillar members supporting the roof. The roof should be coming somewhere here. The pillars coming here, and then there should have been wooden pillars, again wooden pillars here, and they might have supporting the lintel, again a huge lintel made of wood. So this all the mystery, I mean, where the pillar members came from, and again we have to give the credit to Rendella, who conducted a scientific inquiry of comparing the raw materials find from a quarry site. This is a quarry site very close to Dholavira, 3 kilometers from Dholavira, where we can still see unfinished pillar members lying there. They are still lying there. They have left the Harappans. They have left these pillar members there. The history is that the sequence is that they made a rough pillar member here. Then they transported it to the city. Then they polished and smoothened and gave the final shape. And then depending upon the demand from other Harappan sites, they might have exported them. These are the examples from Mohenjo-daro, and this is from Harappan, this is from Mohenjo-daro. Exactly same, and again scientific investigations also proved that they were from the quarry site of Dholavira. So coming to the next important aspect, one of the most important attributes of the site of Dholavira, the ingenuity, the uniqueness, is the water harnessing system, water harnessing and water harvesting system. So I have earlier mentioned about the location of the entire city between these two streams, Mansar and Manhar. So there are evidences at many places of dams, putting stone blocks. They might have constructed a regular feature there. In particular here at the southeastern corner of the city, we see the bedrock chiseled like a vertical phase was chiseled. Then stone members are lying here. So they might have been placed across the riverbed so that the rainwater can be diverted into the two most important reservoirs. Maybe there are many more lying here and there, but these are the most important crucial evidences of water harvesting system at Dholavira. And I also briefly mentioned upon the open spaces. The open spaces, if you look at the Google Earth image, the accumulation of rainwater after a good spell of monsoon at many places. So there could have been open air reservoirs, which also might have been fed by this damming of the Mansar River on the north, and they have been accumulated and collected here. And the overflow, the spillover, it was again let out from the city, and again an open air reservoir might have existed very close to the city. So this is the kind of ingenuity, understand the topography, locating the site between two streams, putting a dam across these two rivers, and diverting the water to man-made reservoirs, letting off the spillover to open air reservoirs, and again the excess water was diverted towards the open air reservoir. So this is the kind of extensive water management system that the Dholavira Harappans adopted, and this became a most important crucial attribute to justify the outstanding universal value. So we have this excellent evidence of the southern reservoir, which is the largest rock cut reservoir. You can see the dimensions here. So this is one of the amazing features, unparalleled in any other Harappan city. And similarly, the eastern reservoir, it is the largest man-made reservoir of the Harappan times, which also has one of the earliest evidences of a step well. Gujarat is very famous for step wells, and the Rani Ki Vav, Patan is another World Heritage property in the state of Gujarat. But if we look at the history of building step wells, tapping the water resources from the water table, so this is the earliest example, again at the site of Dholavira, where we see a 2-meter dia well cut into the bedrock, reaching up to the water table, and there is a flight of steps and retaining walls constructed at least in 3 different time periods. And what about the water harnessing system? One is the water harvesting system, the surface let off water, the rainy season, they were harvesting and storing them. But how to protect the settlement with diverting the rainwater falling extensively inside the settlement itself? Again, they came up with some ingenuity. They devised a storm water drainage system. They discarded all the rainwater falling into the castle, which was the most important administrative division of the city because of its strategic importance, strategic location, extensive architectural features, massive fortification, the kind of findings from this part of the city. So they constructed such an indigenous water harnessing system and also a diverting system. You can see they collected the rainwater. It's a huge funnel-like a system constructed on the eastern wall of the castle, and they collected the water and diverted them into a series of underground channels. So these underground channels were periodically maintained. They were also removed out of the slush and the debris that might have been accumulated through the course of time. We have evidences of the manholes at regular intervals, and it was in use for a pretty longer period. So that's why we see at the topmost point we have this huge drainage, stormwater drainage channel, which is with the height it's equivalent to of a normal human height. So that is the massiveness of drainage system. We can see removing whatever water it is falling on the castle so that it can be safeguarded. So because of its strategic location and importance. So ultimately, this collected accumulated water, it was traveling on this east-west axis, and it came outside the castle through this channel, and a water cascade is here. It entered the Bailey. It could have been stored in an open air reservoir in Bailey, and again after it was filled up, it was let out of Bailey also. So this is the kind of extensive water harvesting and water harnessing system we see at Dholavira, so which also became a most important attribute for justifying the outstanding universal value. Next came the technological. So next comes the technological ensemble here. We have extensive use of various technologies right from the very beginning, like the copper technology, which I told, which emerged around 3000 BCE here, or might have been introduced from some other region. But here extensively, many areas have been excavated to understand the bead manufacturing technologies. Through this excavation, we have come to the knowledge of several raw materials that have been coming from different parts of the Harappan civilization. Gujarat region, it's most famous for agate cornelian, amazonite, limestone, steatite, and copper to a certain extent. But other important raw materials, they are coming from Baluchistan, northern Pakistan, various regions. So this was an important hub of collection of raw materials, manufacturing them, and also redistributing them. So one of the major studies on the agate cornelian, again done by Randall, it has pinpointed 3 important provenance resources in the case of Dholavira. One is the Kandik near Surkotada, Mardak Bait in the Little Run of Kutch, and Ratanpur here in the southern Gujarat. These are the 3 important sources which supplied the entire raw material of agate cornelian to the site of Dholavira. So we have bead manufacturing centers here, and the most important ones, they belong to the late Harappan. I mean, it's a clear example of how the tradition continues, how the technology continued in the case of raw materials and also manufacturing processes here. So there could have been more workshops, but we could not reach to that level. One such workshop of mature Harappan period was exposed in the middle town, where nearly 200 unfinished beads were discovered. Large number of ernestite drill bits were discovered. Ernestite is another important raw material which was exclusively used for manufacturing the drill bits because it is slightly harder than the agate cornelian. So it was the diamond drill bit of the Harappan times, so they could master the bead drilling technology. The Dholavira Harappans in particular, they have the largest number of drill bits so far discovered from any Harappan site. So this is an exceptional testimony of the bead drilling technology, in addition to several other technologies survived at Dholavira. And more importantly, we have very crucial evidences of supply of raw materials to different regions. Like this slide was shared by Professor Mark here, who did extensive research at the site of Harappa. So this particular raw material, this is a banded agate of brownish coffee in color with dark brown bands. So exactly, I mean, this is from Dholavira and this is from Harappa, exactly of the same material. It is found from two different Harappan settlements. One belongs to the sources. I mean, one belongs to the sources in Gujarat, or very close to the sources in Gujarat, and the another very far away from the sources. So definitely, Dholavira might have supplied this kind of raw materials. And interestingly, this finished bead of the same material, it came from the burial. This burial, you can see the bead here. This individual, he was wearing an ornament made of this bead, and from the habitation of Harappa, in a bead manufacturing workshop, this raw material was found. So think about the kind of communication network at that particular point of time, presence of bead manufacturers at two different sites. One is having knowledge of particular raw materials coming from Gujarat. They are getting them through a wide range of interaction between two or three several sites, or many more sites in between. And that's how the trade network might have been established between several sites during the Harappan civilization. This is a very good example of the long distance trade. And Dholavira, we have exceptional evidences of manufacture of this kind of long barrel beads, sometimes reaching up to 5 inches in length. And this is a hallmark. This is a hallmark drilling technology which the Harappans mastered ultimately to create a waistband, a complete waistband, 6 rows of cornelian beads, and the total number goes up to 54 beads. So this is the kind of hallmark manufacturing techniques. And simultaneously, they were decorating the smaller beads, mostly lenticular in shape, with these type of decorations, white color decorations. The white color is achieved after a slow heating. These are eye beads, single-eyed, double-eyed, triple-eyed, then complex patterns, often resembling a human face. So these were in very high demand in West Asia, in countries like modern countries like Oman, Bahrain, Iran, Central Asia. Many regions, they have yielded these decorated cornelian beads, which is more famously known as the etched cornelian beads. But I think they are decorated cornelian beads. The Harappans, they intentionally decorated them with multiple decorations, and also they exported them to distant regions. So we have a wide network. I mean, now we have the knowledge of these kind of beads, the long barrel beads, as well as the decorated cornelian beads coming from several sites spread across this entire region. You can see up to even Egypt, at a site known as Abydos, we have a decorated cornelian bead. Even in West Asia and on the Mediterranean coast, we have all across Syria, Iran, Iraq, then also some sites in Turkey. They have the typical Harappan beads with the manufacturing technique that came at that particular point of time. So this is another important attribute, along with several other technologies like the stoneware bangle manufacturing. Only 3 sites so far have yielded the manufacturing of stoneware bangles: Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and now Dholavira. Then shell bangles, shell ladles, weights, inlay fragments, several other things. And copper metallurgy is signified with this mirror. It was this most sophisticated thing what they produced. And more interestingly, they were fashioning stone bowls. These are bowls manufactured from the local limestone and fossiliferous limestone, which are very easy to fashion in a lathe, and they produced wonderful bowls, maybe for special purposes. And we have a wide array of these sort of weights: chert cubical weights, truncated spherical weights, and also of different shapes. And also we have another very crucial evidence of the presence of large number of seals, this type of seals with the typical Harappan motif and the Harappan sign, this type of rectangular seals with only the Harappan signs, no motif, and we have the ceilings. All these are indications of large-scale commercial transactions along with the church weights. And there could be some ideological transmissions also from the Sindh region to the Dholavira region or the Kutch region. So this is the famous so-called priest king from Mohenjo-daro, and this is the stone sculpture from Dholavira. Both of them share the same posture, same type of what is it, look might have been here. The head is missing. If the head was there, we could have definitely understood the exact position. But otherwise, I mean, the posture is same. They were also broken after the mature Harappan period. They were thrown away. And they were found in a secondary location. So this clearly indicates a kind of a ideological transmission. Maybe they are representing some important individuals, and that's why they were depicted in a particular manner. And coming to the last aspect, we have very good evidence of a unique burial system here in the case of Dholavira. These are large tumulus, a pile of earth, sometimes with concentric mud bricks. You can see the concentric mud bricks here, and sometimes without that, sometimes with a spoke wheel pattern. And inside each, the space between two spokes, there were the evidences of rituals, conducting rituals, even though they didn't have any skeletal remains, but at least we have evidence in the form of artifacts that might have been interred here in a periodical manner to perform certain rituals. We have other categories of burials here, very closely resembling a cyst burial, because the stone was extensively available there, so there was no necessity for constructing a burial with mud brick or a burnt brick. So they used the local stones available, so they erected the stone slabs all around, and they also encased them with a stone slab. And they also cut into the bedrock. Here, there is a very good evidence here. This is the bedrock. They cut a chamber into the bedrock, and then they place the remains. Again, it's devoid of any skeletal remains. Only 2 or 3 burials, that too belong to the late Harappan or the last phase of the Harappan culture here at Dholavira. There were skeletal remains, but they are also very fragmentary in nature. But otherwise, we don't have evidence of any skeletal remains from the main cemetery region. So these are the 3 criteria. Based on all these attributes, we decided that these 3 criteria, one is the kind of influenced by settlements in the scene, that was the exchange of human values, and criteria 3 is the typical example of a Harappan settlement, and criteria 4 is that we have the unique and masterpiece ingenuity of the Harappans during the 3rd millennium BC, set on a landscape in such a manner. I have very well demonstrated how the landscape might have been exploited by the Harappans to locate this most important settlement. So we submitted the dossier on these 3 criteria, and we need to define a nominated zone, that is a nominated property, and a buffer zone. Buffer zone is very important to safeguard the overall outstanding universal value. So we proposed a 148 hectare of buffer zone, but the World Heritage Committee, they advised us to have a larger buffer zone. So later we converted into a 48 square kilometer entire western tip of this Kadir Island. They have been selected as a buffer zone. Now it has been notified by the state government also. So we also devised the movement plan because it is very much essential. We have to sensitize the visitors, which are the most important parts one has to visit, and what time it may require. So we formulated three important routes for the movement plan. And in future, there is going to be a site museum coming here, which will be of international standard, exhibiting various aspects, highlighting the outstanding universal value, highlighting the local handicrafts, and also connecting the site with the present. So these are the future plans, and also devising the management structure. This is very much essential because as per para 108 to 119 of the operational guidelines, these are very much mandatory. We need to have an apex committee and also a regional level committee. The apex committee, it is headed by the Chief Secretary Government of Gujarat, and the regional level committee, it is headed by the district magistrate. So this is the mandatory requirement And the government of Gujarat have taken extraordinary efforts in this directions, and they have immediately notified both these committees. They have notified the buffer zone, and ultimately, when we satisfied all these requirements, the World Heritage Committee, they decided to inscribe this in the World Heritage List, along with a set of future guidelines also. So one of them is related to the site museum, and for which again already the action was taken by the government of Gujarat. And also they also advised to declare the quarry sites. The quarry sites, it is located 3 kilometers away from the site, to declare it as a protected property. So we ASI did it in January itself, well before the World Heritage Committee meeting, and we satisfied, along with the government of Gujarat and Archaeological Survey of India, they took various measures so that were basically required for satisfying many of the conditions laid down by the World Heritage Committee. And they have also suggested various other measures that will be followed in the futures, like long-term research strategy. Even though we emphasized again and again the kind of research activities being conducted in the case of Dholaviran, the kind of research papers are coming up. They have suggested this one, also suggested for an heritage impact assessment, then installing an instrumental monitoring system for robust monitoring, then capacity building, carrying capacity. So these are all tools, actually. These are tools which can be used for having a better management plan, better structure, so that we can safeguard the site. Since it is now in the World Heritage List, we need to safeguard it for the betterment of the entire human community. So that was the basic objective. And to end the presentation, I'll show some of the contemporary sites datable to the 3rd millennium BC, which are on the World Heritage List. And Mohenjo-daro was the only World Heritage property of the Harappan civilization that was inscribed way back in 1980 under criteria 2 and 3. And Shahar-e-Shokhta, it's in Iran. Sarazm, it's in Tajikistan. Then Kalat al-Bahrain, where Harappan artifacts have been found. Then Susa, where Harappan artifacts have been found, and Ashur also, Harappan artifacts have been found. So these are all linkages between the Harappan culture and the West Asian region, and the extensive trade network, which spread maybe for more than 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers. So thank you very much for the patience hearing, and I hope the inscription in the World Heritage List will add more additional responsibilities, and we undertake them in a more constructive manner to satisfy all the conditions laid down by the World Heritage Committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prabhakar. It was an extremely rich presentation, which made us understand in great detail the entire complexity of the UNESCO nomination dossier. And congratulations again for your efforts in securing this nomination. Now I'll request Dr. Sharada of our Archaeological Sciences Center to select some of the questions and orient the debate.
Thank you, Professor Prabhakar and Professor Michel. I request all the participants to please type your comments and questions in the QA box. This will make it easier for us to ensure that we don't miss out on any. I will go to the chat box at the end. We have a few comments and pertinent questions from Professor Ajay Pratap, and he congratulates the Archaeological Sciences Center and Professor Prabhakar upon the success with having Dholavira recognized as a World Heritage Site. And he has two comments to make at the end of which there are questions. So he says, if it is desirable, the more and more important cultural properties in India that are of outstanding universal and cultural value, so as to be inscribed, presumably because more funding becomes available to the administration for their upkeep and development for public, then the Archaeological Survey of India should relax its stringent rules and keep their fieldwork permission portal open in the rolling mode rather than once in a year. I guess this is a suggestion from him. And it should also provide funds together with the permissions with each project leader required to state explicitly in their applications whether they think the site they are working upon has any outstanding universal value. So, do you have any comment on this, Professor Prabhakar?
Well, inscription in the World Heritage list does not ensure any funding opportunities, even though in the past several UNESCO projects have been undertaken for conservation efforts. But nowadays, I mean, it's not essential that the funding will always come. So, what is the benefit? I mean, if you look to the World Heritage Committee document, particularly, there's a separate document on nominating the World Heritage properties. So the overall benefit is the identification, right? It is the identification, it is the involvement of the local communities, it is the recognition, and it is also a safeguard for protection of these cultural heritages and the cultural heritages. One cannot pillage them, one cannot put into disuse. So it's an obligation. It's an obligation on the part of the state party once it is entered into the state in the UNESCO World Heritage list to safeguard them with a better mechanism, international practices and international conventions. So that is the main objective. And of course, state governments, they can also take a lead. I mean, like the Ramappa temple, again, it was a combined effort of the state government and the Archaeological Survey of India bringing it in the World Heritage list. So that's a classic example. And many more states are actively participating in nominating and preparing the nomination dossiers. So it has to follow a certain set of path. I mean, that is well defined. So it is also available online. One can always read, and even they can suggest to the government to put it in a tentative list first, and then they can take part in the nomination dossier process also.
So related to this, he has another point to make. He says if the Archaeological Survey and the universities, institutes, or centers who are the two main contributors to archaeological information nationally, then there should be some kind of a maintenance of statistics about how much, who, when, and where this kind of information is being produced towards cultural preservation. And at the end of the day, sharing of information between these two principal actors, the chief excavators and the chief interpreters, must be streamlined, and its importance recognized through many more platforms, fellowships, joint projects, and other modalities. So, what do you have to say about that?
I think it is already there. Many universities are working in collaboration with many scientific organizations and also international universities. I mean, there are many examples. I don't want to name the examples, but there are already examples available. I don't think there's a special drive or thrust needed in this direction. I mean, if we have kind of good collaborators, then definitely anybody can take a collaborative project and conduct the research. I mean, I think it's not a hurdle.
So the next question is by Mr. T.S. Subramaniam, and it's very interesting. He asks, why wasn't a warehouse found at Dholavira, although it was such a big manufacturing hub? And the ASI has discovered 2 warehouses at Rakhigadi and 1 at Khisara. And did Dholavira have a warehouse at all to store surplus goods or for importing, exporting these goods?
You see, we may not find all features at a single site. I mean, depending upon the area excavated at Dholavira, it's very difficult to say why certain features are not here. It may be there. Maybe that particular area is not excavated. So it's very difficult to say why a certain thing is not found from any site. It could have been there. And also there could have been temporary warehouses also. You see, Dholavira is located on the western part of Khadir, very close to the run of Kutch. They could have situated a warehouse very close to the shoreline also. Who knows, right? I mean, that could have been completely deteriorated and fallen down during the course of time because the island was occupied even during the historical period. So there are a lot of possibilities, and there could have been definitely a warehouse or storage space, definitely. And their small granary has been found in the Bailey region, so it clearly indicates they had knowledge of storage and keeping them for a longer period.
Okay, so Professor Ajit Prasad has a question which is not related to the World Heritage inscription. He is curious to know about the stoneware bangles. Are there any evidences of stoneware bangle production from Dholavira or only bangle fragments? There are a few stoneware bangle fragments, some with Harappan script signs, which are finely inscribed on it.
Yeah, there are a few terracotta rings which actually form the base of that canisters. I mean, what we see from the very good Mohenjo-daro evidence. Apart from the stoneware bangles, there are a few terracotta rings also. That clearly indicates that there should have been a manufacturing hub at Dholavira also.
Shikha Rai has a question. She says, is there any plan to digitize the different components of artifacts in their archaeological context to preserve them for the future?
Anybody can take a project. I mean, interested people, they can always initiate and take a project, and using GIS they can do. I mean, we welcome such initiatives. If anybody has a wonderful idea, has a technical knowledge, they can approach us, and we are ready to support also.
Okay, so this is a slightly offbeat question by Sangeeta S. She says she has visited the site in the year 2013. And is there any way to relate or correlate Dholavira site to the Thileri burial excavation?
Not at all. It's not at all related. It is well separated by time and space. One belonged to 2600 to 1900 BC. Another belonged to 300 BC, well separated by over 1000 years. It cannot be related.
There's a question by Poonam Tambadia, who thanks you for this presentation and for this exciting research. And she asks, are there any direct impacts of the recent climatic changes in the Kutch region? Sorry, this is by Ashish Tambadia, who's a conservation architect. I'm sorry, I saw the name first and then the comment.
I could not understand this question, whether the recent climatic changes in terms of the modern impact, or he's asking about the ancient changes.
No, he's asking about the recent climatic changes in the Kutch region, and have they had any direct impacts on the site or its integrity? I
don't know if there is any marked climatic change and there are any recorded aspects related to that in the case of Kadir Island. But there were in the past climatic changes, and it might have altered the entire landscape as we understand the geology and geomorphology of the Kutch region. There could have been vast changes in the sea levels, and also earthquakes. They affected vastly the wide river networks, and also might be one of the reasons for the abandonment. And we also have this a Meghallian event of 4.2 kilo years, and many people correlate with many different climatic events with evidences from Rajasthan, Himalaya, from Kor near Karachi. So there were definitely climatic changes in the past towards the end of the 3rd millennium BCE, and that might have started the long cultural change and also gradual abandonment of the settlements.
Mr. Ashish Tambadia clarifies in another post later that he's referring to recent torrential rains, whether this might have affected the site, so perhaps in its present stage of...
No, in terms of conservation, the Archaeological Survey of India has taken enough conservation measures to tackle this problem. I mean, even last year, not last year, in 2019, when we were assessing the conservation preparedness of the site after submission of the dossier, there was a torrential rain, and it was raining continuously. So we could effectively arrest all the erosional features by construction of surface water drains and also contour drains, diverting the rainwater from the most dangerous points, and totally diverting them. So it was a success story, and regular maintenance of such drainage networks will vastly help in the preservation of the site.
Okay. Mr. Sohan Lal Modanawal, he has a question for you that he says we have a signboard from Dholavira of 10 letters. Except that, do we have any other signboard? And what are the materials that have been used for such forms of writing?
We don't have any other signboard, even though there is a fragmentary stone inscription from Dholavira consisting of 4 letters. And in the case of signboard, they used gypsum inlays.
Okay. The next question is by Saurav Lai. He asks, why did they store rainwater at all, though they had two rivers adjacent to the site, and they created these very large drainage system or canals for water purposes? It seems that there was some kind of shortage of water, and only the monsoon season rivers were full of water.
I think the first part is answered by the second part itself. I mean, the question itself answers the first part.
Any progress with regard to the decipherment of the script? Asks Professor Ajay Pratap.
It's a long.
And we have a talk all about
long endeavor by many scholars, and I think it's a very difficult task due to the absence of bilingual inscriptions, long inscriptions, and also the nature of the inscriptions of the Harappan civilization. So they are all short label inscriptions, probably mentioning the name of a person, maybe it's tribal, a name of the tribe, and other things. Otherwise, it's very difficult when compared to the overall structure of other inscriptions that have been deciphered, and also many of the scripts that have been deciphered without the aid of bilingual or trilingual scripts. Harappan script is very difficult. Yeah, another thing is it might have been used for writing many different languages, because the entire Harappan civilization consisting of different regions of Sindh, Balochistan, Cholistan, Punjab, Gujarat, they might be speaking different languages, different dialects, but they might have been using the same script. So that is another complexity.
If I may add, we had earlier in this series Dr. Nisha Yadav from TIFR, who's researched the script very much in depth through advanced statistical methods in particular. So you can find the video recording on the website of our center. I will try to share in the chat box the URL now.
We have a very interesting question, but unfortunately it's an anonymous attendee who asks, is there any evidence of earthquake in Dholavira? And if yes, what kind of evidence was it?
You see, the entire Kutch region is an active earthquake zone, and Dr. Bisht here records very crucial evidences of an earthquake in the fortification area. When he was excavating the fortification area, he observed certain features which clearly indicate a large-scale sliding of fortification arms, and also damages caused due to this. And that is one of the very crucial evidences. Other evidences are found in the case of North Gate, where there are evidences of tilting of walls, they are out of plumb, and that could be another evidence of earthquake.
Dr. Shivanagi Reddy asks, how much time did it take to get the World Heritage Site tag since submission of the proposal?
So the nomination dossier was submitted on January 30th, 2020. Then the disc review started, and at the same time the COVID also started. So after the disc review, a on-site evaluation happens, but because of the COVID situation, it was delayed. It should have been completed by September, but it extended up to December. In December 2020, the site evaluation was completed by an ICOMOS expert, and again there was a desk review in January 2021. Then there were additional set of questions by February 2021. We replied that to the satisfaction of the ICOMOS and World Heritage Committee, and then in July 2021, in the meeting in Fuzhou, China, it was so starting from January 2020, it took 1.5 years. 18 months for completing it. But before that, it took 2 years for preparation of the dossier itself.
So I think we have time for 2 more questions. Again, this is by the next one is by an anonymous attendee who asks, what is the approximate elevation between the citadel and the lower town?
At least 3 to 4 meters difference.
Okay. And Shikharai asks, what are the plannings to preserve exposed archaeological site from further erosion?
See, one of the basic component of a nomination dossier is a site management plan. I mean, that is a prerequisite, and the state party, here in the case Archaeological Survey of India, they devised various methodologies, how to monitor, how to use certain materials, how to follow the certain principles. So everything has been outlined. So there are many different causes, I mean, many different reasons for the deterioration, particularly in an exposed site. Fortunately, here at Dholavira, we have stone elements in the architecture, so we were in a better control, and the erosion, only the erosion was happening due to during the rainy season. So again, devising suitable drainage channels in the long term, it will help continuous monitoring, repairing to the drains, and also strengthening some of the loose parts. That's it. I mean, that is the only thing. But another very crucial, important aspect is the movement of the visitors over the excavated portions. I mean, that is a very important aspect what we have observed at Dholavira, because the visitors, they carelessly walk over the excavated remains, and being limestone used in the construction, it is much prone for erosion. So now ASA has devised a suitable mechanism of putting a barrier so that the visitors, they cannot enter into the excavated area. So these are some of the important steps that can be taken. Erosion should be tackled, and also visitor movement, if it is better maintained and managed, these are sufficient.
I think we have covered almost all the important questions here. There are a lot of congratulatory messages for you for this wonderful talk. I request Professor Daninam to conclude this session.
I think Dr. Prabhakar has already given the conclusion that this UNESCO nomination is actually putting more responsibility on all stakeholders, from Archaeological Survey of India to the Gujarat government, to the local government agencies, to the local communities, and basically to everyone interested in preserving this heritage. So it's up to all of us to make the best of this opportunity, and to learn also in the process, what does it mean to conserve and such a fabulous site, and also to spread the knowledge of, because this is now of universal value, and what does it mean to find universal value in such a site. So it's an educational process also for all of us, I feel, in the end. Thank you so much, Dr. Prabhakar. It was extremely rich and informative, and we now understand the entire procedure much better. Thank you. And thanks to everyone for attending this talk.